Hello and welcome back to The Wargamer. In this tutorial I'll be showing you how to paint Warlord Games' Firelock Storming Party in the colours of Prince Ruperts Blewcoats, and I'll be using the Army Painter range of paints to do so. Before we can begin painting your miniatures, you'll first of all need to prime it, and for this I've used a grey spray primer, as it will really help when applying some of the neutral colours such as the blues and the browns that we'll be painting in this miniature. Once primed, the first area of the miniature that I'll be painting will be the breeches and the stockings. I'll be painting both of these areas with a base coat of Dungeon Grey. Now, as with all of my base coats on this miniature, I would recommend creating a mixture of 1 part paint to 1 part water and applying at least several thin down coats, allowing the layers to thoroughly dry in between application. With the base coat applied, we now want to achieve some definition in the breeches and the stockings, and for this I'll be applying a wash of dark tone ink. Now, dark tone ink straight out of the bottle may be a little bit too strong, so I'd recommend using a mixture of 2 parts ink to 1 part water. With this mixture I'll be applying it over both the breeches and the stockings. If you want to achieve a little bit of definition between the two areas, I'd recommend mixing in a little bit more water when you wash the stockings. This will result in a lighter coloured grey. The final step in painting our grey areas is to finish off with a highlight of Stone Golem. Now, we want to take a small brush with just a small amount of paint on the tip of our brush and lightly pick out the raised sections of cloth. Mixing in just a small amount of water with your paint will really assist in getting those thin lines, and overall this will give it the impression of greater detail in these areas. While still using the Stone Golem, I'll now be base coating the shirt cuffs and also the shirt collar as well. Now, remember to make your mixture of 1 part paint to 1 part water and apply at least 2 thin down coats. To complete the slightly off-white colour of the shirt, I'll now be highlighting the edges using Brain Matter Beige. With the shirt completed, we can now move on to painting the soldier's coat. I'll be starting off with a base coat of deep blue. This will give us the nice blue colour that we want for Prince Ruperts Blewcoats. As well as painting the coat, I'll also be base coating the garters, which are holding up the stockings as well. With the base coat of deep blue dried, we can now apply a wash of blue ink over the areas we painted in the previous steps. The blue ink will create shading by flowing into the recesses, and this will really enhance the detail of these blue areas. The final step in painting the blue areas is to pick out those raised edges with a thin highlight of Griffin Blue. With most of the clothing completed, we can now move on to painting the leather areas of the miniature. Now, the way I'll be painting them here isn't necessarily the only way that they were presented, and lots of the colours were interchangeable. I would highly recommend doing a little bit of research and find out exactly which colours were used for different areas. Now, in this example, I'll be painting the leather strap, which is holding the leather scabbard, with a base coat of fur brown. Now, before I continue painting the leather strap, I'll now be painting the cloth satchel that's hanging at the soldier's side with a base coat of hemp rope. With base coats completed for both the hemp rope and the fur brown areas, we can now apply a wash to both of these areas using soft tone ink. The very subtle colouring of this ink will allow us to get some definition in these areas without affecting the colour too much. With the wash dried, I'll now be applying a thin edge highlight of barbarian flesh to the fur brown strap that we painted in the previous steps. Continuing with our highlights, I'll now be highlighting the edges of the cloth satchel using troll claws. The next areas of the miniature that I'll be tackling will be the dark brown areas, and for this I'll be using oak brown. Now, these areas include the stock of the firelock, the grip and the scabbard of the sword, and also the soldier's hair as well. Now, this next step consists of 2 parts, and for both of those I'll be using Monster Brown. The first task is to base coat the powder flask and its associated strap with the leather brown. Once this has been completed, we can now move on to highlighting the areas we painted in the previous step using the leather brown again. In this next step, I'll now be washing over the oak brown and leather brown areas that we've painted in the last 2 steps. This dark brown wash will serve to slightly darken the colour of these areas, as well as improving the definition by flowing into those recesses. The final step in painting our brown leather areas is to highlight the powder flask using Monster Brown. The final leather area on our miniature to tackle will be the leather shoes, and I'll be using a base coat of matte black for these areas. Once our base coat has been completed, we can now begin highlighting the black areas of our miniature using Dungeon Grey. Remember to mix in a small amount of water with your highlight to get the thinnest lines possible. The next area of our miniature that I'll be tackling will be the face and the hands, and for this I'll be starting off with a base coat of tanned flesh. Now at this stage of the painting process, there are lots of areas that have already been completed, so do be careful not to overspill onto these finished areas. With the base coat of tanned flesh completed, these skin areas are looking very flat and dull. Now we want to improve the definition of these areas by applying a wash of flesh wash. The very final step in painting our skin areas is to highlight them using barbarian flesh. Now we want to use a thin brush for this and use it to pick out some of the facial features such as the nose, the cheeks, the lips and the chin, and also the fingers by picking out some of the individual fingers and the knuckles as well. The very final step in painting our miniature is to tackle the metallic areas. Now we're painting these with a base coat of gunmetal. Now on this particular miniature, the metal areas include the workings of the firelock as well as its barrel, and also the pommel of the sword as well. The very last step in painting our Firelock armed soldier is to wash over the metallic areas that we've painted in the previous step using dark tone ink. This will darken down the colour slightly as well as bringing out the detail and give us that nice blackened metal effect that we're going for. And here we have the completed member of the Firelock Storming party. Now this is my first English Civil War era tutorial, so please do let me know what you thought of it in the comments below, and also subscribe to be kept up to date with any future Civil War era tutorials that I may do. Now before I finish off, I just want to say a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters. It's your support that gives me the opportunity to create these tutorials on a regular basis. So a big thank you to you guys, and if you're interested in supporting me as well, you can do so by checking out my Patreon page, which you can find a link to in the description below. And from there you can donate to me from as little as $1 a month, which will just really help me in producing future content. So all that's left to say is thanks for watching and goodbye.